Welcome back to Beyond the Script. Today we're going to discuss how to look at identity transitions in the same way that we look at business data. So, when we think about our identity, right? When we think about how we want to uplevel our identity, how we want to change some things, how we want to evolve, we don't always consider when we revert back to old identities as an opportunity for growth. We don't analyze it in the same way that we analyze our business data. And so let me give you an example. When we're testing something in business, whether that's a new platform, a new strategy, in a new email marketing headline, a subject line for A/B testing or anything like that, we test, we see if it works, and we keep trying until it clicks. We will analyze the data and we will say, okay, this headline got this many opens, this got this many click rates. Maybe we'll keep a portion of it, but tweak it to sound like something different, right? We do that in our business when we're looking at that type of analytics. But then when it comes to our own identity and changing and evolving our identity, whenever we do something that doesn't yield the results that we want, that doesn't align with our higher selves, we don't take it as an opportunity to look at it like data. We get very emotional. Humans are emotional beings. We start to be upset with ourselves. We start to criticize ourselves. We start to feel shame around it. We start to feel guilt over whatever it is, right? While we're in the middle of, I'll call it an identity up leveling, while we're in the middle of this up leveling. So when we feel these things, we don't take a moment to pause and analyze because we get so caught up in feeling. But if you would look at your habits and your beliefs from an analytical standpoint, you can then figure out what serves you and what doesn't serve you. And this is going to make a lot of sense to people who are in business and who, have done analytical work and things like that, but it's applicable to everybody. So when we actually are in the midst of like transforming an identity, cutting out an old habit, right? You're cutting out an old habit and you are doing really well. You're making progress and you're feeling aligned and you're moving in the direction you're meant to be moving and all of these things. And then something happens that reverts you back to an old cycle. That is an opportunity to look at the data. What caused you to move backwards? How did you feel going back into the loop? What is something you can do differently the next time? And it's in these moments where we analyze our processes of how we live our life that we're actually able to move forward and evolve into next stages, because now we have power in pausing. Now we're able to recognize, okay, this situation, this scenario, this person, this place, this feeling reverts me back into old habits. This thing makes me run back to my old identity. And so in order for me to move forward, now, one, I'm aware that this can do that. So I can pull out my tools to not let that happen. Or two, I can avoid the situation altogether. And so this is how you start to look at identity shifts and identity up levelings as from an analytical standpoint, as if you were, checking out the data on your business. It is not that different. It is not that different at all. The thing that separates us is or separates business from identity is we don't necessarily get that entire emotional attachment to business. Like, yes, there is attachments that happen. And I think I've touched on like the law of detachment in other episodes. I'm not going to get into why you should detach from those things today, but for the most part, when it comes to business, we know that we can try again. We know that we can tweak it. We know that we can make it better. We know that the data is showing XYZ, therefore we're going to do something different to get the results that we want. And at the same time, we don't give ourselves that same grace. We don't look at slip ups or as reverting into old patterns as data points. And so I challenge you to start to look at these things as data points. I challenge you to look at these as an opportunity for redirection, an opportunity to grow, an opportunity to rewrite a belief, because there is something underneath the surface in the belief system that you're defending that made you go back into these old habits or go back, into these old identity patterns. And that's not to say it's a bad thing. Identity changes are very challenging, but what it is to say is it doesn't mean you have to attach and believe that there's something wrong with you because you didn't, make it to, we'll call it the next level, right? You didn't make it to that next level. And so when we attach our feelings of shame and or guilt to it, then we lose sight of the growth and the opportunity at hand. Okay. You can feel your feelings. I'm not opposed to that. I'm not opposed to feeling the feels. Because that's how you actually move through them quicker. In the book The Power of Now, he touches on this and he says that, you need to feel what you're feeling in order to move through it. A lot of the times we try to avoid feelings because they're uncomfortable. And then in the avoidance, when we're avoiding feelings because they're uncomfortable, we're actually not learning because our mind is preoccupied with not feeling. Our mind is preoccupied with avoiding. Our mind is preoccupied with doing everything in our power to not be in the present moment. But when we allow ourselves to feel what we need to feel and be in the present moment, then we can move through it. Now that we've moved through it and we can now look at it from a bird's eye view, now we're able to analyze it. Now we're able to look at our slip ups, for lack of a better term, through analytical eyes. We're able to look at it as data. And it's when we look at it as data that we can move through it. I always say that entrepreneurship is spiritual, right? I pride myself in talking about like the spiritual side of entrepreneurship and how it's more than just strategies and numbers and things like that. Like there's a huge identity piece that goes along with it. But on the flip side, on the other hand, however you want to put it, I was going to say in the revert side, but that does not make sense. But on the other hand, and looking at it, flipped, the same principles that run a business and that scale a business and that make a business profitable are the same principles that you can use when you're changing your identity, when you're up leveling your identity, when you're remembering who you are before the world told you what to be, before the beliefs were instilled in you, right? You're coming back to a state of remembrance. And so this episode is short today, but that's really what I have for you is that I challenge you to look at your identity shifts from an analytical standpoint, become self-aware, look at this as data, look at what caused, whatever situation. Like I said earlier, ask yourself some questions. What led me to go backwards? How did it feel to go backwards? What place was the trigger? What belief am I holding on to that needs to be rewritten? Because a lot of the times it's just an old belief that needs to be rewritten. And you can't access that if you are condemning yourself because you keep doing the same thing. You have to take emotions out of it, feel what you need to feel, and then move on, and then take the emotions out of it and then look at it through analytical eyes, the same way that you would a business. This whole year is how I have been able to evolve in several identities and, actually allow them to become the way that I want them to be. And it's been because I look at when I revert back to an old loop or an old pattern, I look at it through analytical eyes so that I can do it differently the next time. I figure out what triggered that moment to make me go back and what belief am I holding on to that I felt I needed to reinforce. And then once I have that information, I'm able to do it differently the next time. So that's what I have for you today. I challenge you to look at your own identity up levels the same way. If this episode resonated with you, please feel free to share it with anybody else who's going through an identity shift. And then, as always, you can find me over on TikTok and Instagram, new username at Nikki Lynn Mayo. You can also find me under the same username on Substack, where I do more involved writings on things like this. I do have an article about identity shifts and how you can look at them from a data standpoint. So be sure you're tuned in over there. And then also be sure so you don't miss out on any announcements that are coming up. Everybody have a wonderful Tuesday, and I will talk to you all next week.